ContactTalkRadio.com. Consciousness in action. And you are taking action into your consciousness by tuning into Contact Talk Radio.
And on TuneIn.com, Hing.fm, and UpSnap Mobile.
Contact Talk Radio. Inspiration, brave action, and heartwarming journeys. This is what the Louise H. Reed Show brings you. Now, here's your host, Louise H. Reed.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. Each week, I invite you to sit in on a conversation with a new guest where we get level, bringing you real people, real issues, and real conversations. My hope is that you walk away from the show inspired and equipped to level up in your own life and leadership. As you know, if you'd like a copy of the best of notes and quotes from the show, please subscribe to my email list at louisehreed.com. Now, without further ado, you've not come to listen to me. Let me introduce you today to today's awesome guest, Andy Kaufman. Andy is a recognized expert on leadership and project management. He is the president of the Institute for Leadership Excellence and Development, Inc., which helps organizations around the world improve their ability to lead and deliver. In addition to running the Institute, Andy works with leaders at the United Nations to improve their ability to deliver on their initiatives. He teaches MBA classes at Loyola, Chicago's Quinlan School of Business, and works with global clients such as Marriott International, Microsoft, United Airlines, Grainger, and ExxonMobil, and the list goes on. Before becoming an internationally sought-after speaker, Andy started as a software developer and was promoted into management for all the wrong reasons. As he grew from frontline manager to senior leader, Andy developed approaches for leading and delivering that he now shares with audiences and coaching clients around the world. Finally, he's the author of 3 books and host of the acclaimed People and Projects podcast, which provides interviews and insights for his global listeners on how to lead and deliver. Andy, welcome to the show.
Oh man, Louise, I've been looking forward to this ever since we started talking. What was it, a couple months ago or so? So,
right.
Congratulations on the book. I mean, that is like really cool. That like #1 right out of the gate. So in a bunch of categories.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I'll take those virtual high fives.
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you so much. You know what it's like to go through the process, and so yeah,
pour your heart into it, and yeah, that's cool.
Absolutely, that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that celebration with me. I really appreciate it. There's so many interesting things. One of them I mentioned to you before we've gone live on the show, about some intersections, about how some similarities that we've experienced and some vast differences in our own career trajectories. Can't wait to explore all of that. I actually want to maybe even start there. I'm fascinated by what I read in your bio. You started out as a software developer. And promoted into management for all the wrong reasons. So your words, not mine. So just to be clear, for those who are listening.
We're both right.
Tell me what you mean by that, because that is honest. And I see that all the time. So tell me what you mean by that.
Yeah. So it's classic, whether it's in tech, like you grew up as on the HR side of tech, but I grew up as a software developer side. But I work with like a salesperson. Someone's a really good salesperson. Let's make them a manager of salespeople, right? She's a good accountant. Let's make her a manager of accountants. Same thing in my story. And what happens is we so easily destroy the teams that we are now put over because it's sometimes called the halo effect, right? They're good at this, so clearly they'll be good at this. But like Jay was a soccer player. Just because somebody's a good soccer player doesn't mean they're going to be a good coach of soccer players. And it's the same sort of thing. So in my experience, we were a small company bought out by another company, bought out by a really big company. When that happened, they fired out a bunch of the original managers, and they're like, "Oh yeah, he seems to be okay. He's reasonably good at that. Let's make him a manager of And Louise, that makes
with
sense.
no training, and probably with no training, just figure it out.
Right. Yeah. So, it's one of those things. It's one thing to have book knowledge about what you're supposed to do, but I made so many mistakes. I tried to be the buddy. I tried to drop hints. I tried to be the doer and the leader. I mean, it's quite a journey in that regard.
Quite a journey. And that's partly then, no doubt, what has led you to how you now, you developed by trial and error, it sounds like, these thoughts and approaches, and now share that with others. Tell us a little bit about that journey to entrepreneurship. I'm really interested in that piece as well, right? We've got lots of people who say, I'm going to write a book, and as you've written 3. We have a lot of people who say they want to start a business and don't do anything with that. So tell us a little about that sort of transition period.
Yeah. It's a really interesting thing to hear people's stories. And that's what your show really does a great job of drawing people's stories out. And, I when I was a software developer, I mean, to this day, I still love the tech side. I knew in high school I wanted to be a software developer. I didn't go through this, what do I want to be someday? I knew that's what it was. After that being promoted for all the wrong reasons, after a while, I'm like, all right, I kind of see how this works and I'm starting to enjoy it. I got promoted to a manager and a director and eventually a vice president. So here's the interesting thing, Louise, on the journey as people climb a ladder is sometimes what you do is you get up there and after a while you're like, I don't know if I actually enjoy this part. Like I think there's so much emphasis on you got to get to that next level. What do you say, take the next level, only to find out that next level really isn't all it's cut out to be. And at some point, I mean, I got to the point where I looked at my boss and there was very little about that role that attracted me. And as I got further up there, it also was like, I'm not even doing what I'm best at. So backstory, about 7 years before starting the company, we were using some reasonably cool technology, and Microsoft said, hey, would you come and present a 5-minute, just case study at one of our conferences? And at that time, Louise, if I would have had to present in front of 10 people, I would have been so freaked out that I wouldn't be able to sleep very well the night before. This was in front of 7,500 people. And for some reason, when they asked, I'm like, well, sure. And after I hung up, I'm like, what
did I just do?
I was so stupid. So it wasn't just like one night of bad sleep. It was like a week of bad sleep. And my company could tell I was freaked out about it. So they got me a coach. I'm like, I'm really, really nervous. And the coach goes, as soon as you stop puking, you lose your edge. So it's okay. But anyway, it went reasonably well, and they invited me to give another thing at a smaller venue, and so interestingly, the thing that was probably my greatest fear, and not as a cliche, I mean, literally my greatest fear, which was speaking in front of a group of people, all of a sudden, once, maybe twice a year, maybe 3 or 4 times a year, I had a very supportive boss that would allow me to go speak at conferences, things like that. All of a sudden that led to, not very often, but every once in a while, someone would come up and go, do you do this for a living? I'm like, you can do that for a living? How does that work? And so I started hanging out with people that were doing it for a living. And so like a lot of entrepreneurs, like Adam Grant talks about in his book on innovation, he goes, I think he actually would say most, but many entrepreneurs start off it's as a side hustle. Don't quit the job. Don't lose start it on the side just to see if this is something that you actually like or good at, can make money. And so that was kind of my story. And I got to the point, and so I think your book was about key moments, right? Isn't it
the one thing that changed everything. Yeah.
Right. So in some ways, one of my key moments was saying yes to the Microsoft thing. There was every reason to say no to that. And anybody listening to us has got every reason to say no to what could be their key moment, right? It could be their key moment. And so I had another key moment, and this was around late 2000, early 2001, where I could see that this might just be something I might want to do. But I don't know about you, Louise, but I'm not so my impression of you be bold, Louise, put yourself out there, and so that's not necessarily me. I mean, I think in many respects, I grew up was like, hey, you take a job, you keep a job, you like work hard and good things happen. Starting a company was not something that was necessarily a big aspiration, but I got to the point where I'm like, I would like to give it a go. And I happened to attend a church where the former head of HR of Motorola attended as well. I got to know him a little bit. He goes, I do coaching. I'm like, really? I mean, this is a guy that people used to spend $10,000 US to have breakfast with him. And he's going to do this for free. And so I'm like, all right. So he did this like really intense, like till late in the night and all day the next day sort of thing. And he goes, Andy, I think you're wired for it. I think you've got experience for it. I think, if you want to go off and do this entrepreneurial thing, I think there's reason to think this could work. And so that was in late 2001. Probably the most depressing part of the conversation with him was, and you need 12 months of capital liquid.
Yeah. The excitement just goes boom.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And his point was a lot of times when people start something new, they run out of money 2 months into it, or they're so freaking out 2 months into it of where's the money going to come from. And I'm not saying I didn't have that, but here's the deal. We had about 6 months. And with my current company, I had a conversation. What do you want to do when you grow up with my boss? And he's like, I think we can get you a package. We got a 6-month package. We got 6 months there. Let's do it. And started the company 2 weeks before 9/11 in the US.
Oh, wow.
Terrible time.
Oh, wow.
That was the start of the journey. It went from greatest fear to saying yes, which often is key moments, often are predicated with saying yes to an opportunity that maybe doesn't make a whole lot of sense, to more yeses, to I'm going to take a year. I'm going to take a year. If it bombs, so be it. Yeah. Yeah. And we'll go back and get a regular job. But it was about 13 months, by the way. It was about 13 months, and then I haven't looked back. So. And
I love that. I like so much to take away from that story. It's fascinating because everyone's got a different story, right? Everyone's got a different story to that journey between corporate and entrepreneurship, which is so cool. I find that stuff really fascinating. Maybe that's why I got into HR. The people side of things is fascinating, and there was just no human resources. It was my experience. Right. So anyway, that's a whole other topic.
You should write a book called Humanizing Leadership or something.
Maybe, right? Yeah. Andy, you're great for me. Thanks for the plug.
Well, you're already in it, so I know that.
Yeah, I'm working on that. That's another baby that I feel like I'm 9 months pregnant with. Right. I like what you were saying about it being a greatest fear, then saying yes to a thing that might really not make a lot of sense. And then it's just kind of a building then of other yeses. Mm-hmm. Fear is a very interesting thing as well. We're wired for fear, obviously. That's what's kept us alive. And Jay, I know, who is listening right now, he hates hearing me say that, bless his heart, because I say it all the time. But fear gets in the way, in so many parts of our lives. Oh, yeah. In ways that, we don't necessarily need to let it anymore. Yeah. It's not about saving our child from running in front of a car. Oftentimes throughout the day, it's other fear creeps in other ways that keeps us small. Mm. So if there's someone listening now who's kind of on the precipice of on that change, or standing on the brink of that cliff to jump into entrepreneurship, what guidance would you have to them specifically around the fear element?
Yeah, that coach said, as soon as you stop puking, you lose your edge. So her thing was that fear is good, right? But there's, when I was in my late 20s, early 30s, I struggled a lot with anxiety. Like I hadn't really, that I recall, struggled with it earlier, but that was a really scary time for me. Like I felt like maybe it was part of a coming of age. Part of it was having to kind of let down the armor of, I don't have to have it all together. So there's a lot that goes into fear, and And your last guest talked about even, maybe generational stuff in there. So there's all kinds of reasons why that could be there. But here's something I learned from a guest on the podcast a while back. He talked about a guy named Dr. David McClelland, he wrote a book called Human Motivation, which if you and I had a copy of his book, it'd be, like a couple inches thick. But if you try to read it, it's like, a meter deep. It's really thick academic treatment on human motivation. But here's something that I have found to be really helpful for aspiring entrepreneurs, but actually for any one of us that are thinking about saying a yes, is he says, well, let me ask it this way. Before you launched your book, Louise, what % likelihood did you want to have that it would be a successful book? That people would buy it? Like deep down, what % likelihood of success did you want?
Did I want?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Did I want or did I think? Those are two different things.
Go with one.
Want? Well, 100%.
Exactly. Before anyone takes a new job, before anyone takes on a new project, before anyone starts a podcast, before we do any of that stuff, deep down, what we want is 100%. And so where's the fear come in that we know it's not 100%, which is right kind of you're going of like the think. But I bet you were thinking greater than 0, right? I mean,
my mom's gonna buy it, and Jake's gonna buy it.
Yeah, my first podcast episode in 2009. I probably only my parents listened or whatever, but still, it's one of those things where I think deep down what we want is 100%. But the reason why we sometimes feel fearful about making the jump is we know we don't have 100% likelihood of success. So here's what McClellan found, and I'll summarize it. But you and I, and everyone listening to us, are most motivated if we only have a 50 to 70% likelihood of success. Okay? So that to me was empowering, because deep down the I want assurances, Andy, the I want guarantees, Andy, at 100%. I mean, if you really think about it, like even though you and I want 100%, that even today's conversation will go great. If this was 100%, the truth is it'd be boring, because I would just be reciting things that I always recite, and you'd just be asking the same questions that you always ask, and it would just be boring. When if you have a book that's 100% likelihood of success, I don't even know what that would even mean. Like, I don't even know if the world offers 100%. So we feel fearful because it's not 100%. So what I love about McClellan's research is it's empowering. Like if you and I have, or anybody listening, less than a 50% likelihood of success, maybe we ought to rethink that. It's probably not a really good idea. But do we have a 50 to 70% likelihood of success? If so, we should use that as motivation to lean in. And so this is going to sound absolutely ridiculous, but I had this, I don't remember how many vitamins were in it, like 180. It was like it was something like 6 months of vitamins. And when I started my company, I shook them in front of my wife. I'm like, look, honey, I still want to be in business when this vitamin jar is done. So it's like, I was just like, I don't even know if I'll be able to do that, but I had just enough experience to know, I think I've got a 50-50 shot.
Yeah.
And then with the advice from the coach, give it a year. So like, give it a year. Now, the key part, I think, for entrepreneurs is sometimes what people do is they keep trying to do something and it just isn't working. As my friends in the south of the U.S. say, that dog don't hunt. I mean, it's like you're trying to start a business and it just isn't working for one reason or another. Maybe it's not enough demand. Maybe it's like, I'm not the right guy for whatever. But if we say, give ourselves this time window, set a tripwire. Maybe it's a year out. Maybe for somebody else, they can feel like they can do it for 2 years or whatever it is. But give yourself that time. And if you don't feel a little nervous, it means you probably don't get it. If you don't feel a little bit fearful, but use that 50 to 70% thing to like fire you up. Like I've been doing it for 19 years now. I still have no trouble getting up in the morning. I'm like, I always feel like I'm one, terrorist attack, pandemic, whatever. Like crazy things can happen that can hurt the economy. There's no guarantees. There's no guarantees. And so I don't know, any thoughts on that 50 to 70? Like to me, that's empowering.
I love that. It really is. I'm going to try that. A question I have for you, and I realize that this might be a little out of scope for you, but I'm just interested in your thoughts. Yeah. what's your thoughts on how do you know when to persevere and when to pivot? Right? And I don't think there's an easy answer to that, right?
Oh, no. But it's a question I ask in a decision-making class I teach at the business school.
Okay.
Like, when is it that you're persevering and being persistent, and when is it denial of reality?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
So when is it, Andy?
Well, here's the deal: is I've interviewed people on it. I've had interesting discussions on it, and interestingly, we often only know at the end. Yeah, we often only know at the end. In the moment, we kind of don't know. So for example, a lot of times we when we're growing up, at least in English-speaking countries, people go, "Hey, Louise, don't assume," because you know what the word assume means. Right? We're told that. We don't assume. But the interesting thing about assumptions is when people say that, it's when it turned out to be a bad assumption. Oh, see? You assume. Jay, stop assuming. Yeah, that's why. So something like that, right? So remember to share that with them later. So, but if it would have turned out great, it'd be, Jay, that was great planning. So you see what I'm saying? Assumptions are neither good nor bad. It's just that we say they're bad or they make us look bad when they turn out to be bad assumptions. But when they turn out to be good assumptions, then that was good planning. So I think in the moment, I mean, in retrospect, we can look back and go, oh, that was a terrible mistake. Like, what was I thinking? But in the moment, is it persistent or is it denial of reality? So I don't feel like I have any like formula for this one, but this is an example someone gave me in the class when we were talking about this very subject. He said, because one of my best friends, the girl he was dating, everyone around him knew this was going to be a train wreck. And everyone told him, and he goes, yeah, but we've been together for so long. And so I just feel like, it's got to be the right thing to do. And they got married, and it turned out to be a train wreck. It turned out to be a train. I don't know these people, so I'm just saying what the guy told me in class. But I think part of denial of reality is surrounding ourselves with people who will give us a little dose of reality. And so let's say you got a friend that wants to open a restaurant, and you go, a good supportive friend might go, Louise, that's a great idea. You're such a good cook. Oh, I love eating your food. Go for it. Right. That's one friend. Another friend would say, let me show you some statistics overall on restaurants. Okay. And let's talk about pandemic impact on restaurants. Now, I like hanging out with friend number one, not friend number two.
Right.
But we need friend number two in our life sometimes to help us know is this persistence or is it denial of reality? And let's face it, some great inventors probably were surrounded by people that said, stop it. And they kept going and they created great things. So I don't know. But if the people like Keith Ferrazzi told me in an interview, he wrote a book called Who's Got Your Back? And he said, you need this inner circle of people that can really be honest with you, that you don't have to have any masks up. You don't have to have any guard up, and they don't either. And if I'm pursuing, it could be an entrepreneur sort of thing. If someone's pursuing a relationship, if someone's heading down maybe a lifestyle path that is just not healthy for them, do they have somebody? It's easier to change it when it's early in.
Yes.
By being nice. And now in the business, they've thrown all kinds of money. Relationship-wise, maybe they've alienated so many people. Health-wise, they've so degraded because we were afraid to kind of speak up, And so there's no formula for it. But I think, I don't know, maybe it's back to those key moments. The key moment might be, this is where I need to speak up to a friend, or switching roles, I need to ask of a friend and go, hey, Louise, real quick, here's what I'm thinking. Like, if deep down, what do you think about this? Is it denial of reality? Is it persistence? And I like to think that if we surround ourselves well, there'll be those people that'll be like, not just saying it, wishful thinking. They'll be like, Louise, write that book. I'm telling you, take that jump. And we're here to help you, So I don't know. What's your take? Like, can you?
Well, that's interesting. Well, first of all, I really like all of what you said. I think it's fascinating, and I think that in and of itself, having the courage to have that kind of conversation with a friend, can be really helpful. But what actually came to mind when you were sharing was a friend of mine who is a 10-time Emmy award-winning storyteller. So she calls it, everyone needs a supporting cast of characters. I was like, that's cool, right? So we all need those different people that you were commenting on. So my take is, in a situation like that, is who is taking a step back for a moment, and identifying who your supporting cast of characters are, and making sure that you cover them all.
Yeah.
And then the ones that you're fearful of asking, you probably need to ask the most.
Right. That's a really good way of saying it, Louise. Yep. Like, who is it that you really don't want to ask because you know what they're going to say, but it doesn't mean you have to follow them, right? I mean, it's not like a tally of like, oh wow, friend said this, two said that. So, but if it's 10-0 of 10, this is denial of reality, and 0 persistence,
think about it a little bit.
Yeah, you might want to think about that.
You might want to think about it a little bit.
Or we're having the wrong people, where maybe we need people who are more risk takers and things like that too. Maybe, but I don't know. I think it is a really interesting. Denial of reality is deadly. Denial of reality is deadly.
And it's hard for me not to go here. Well, I don't really want to stay in this space for too long. I think we are seeing evidence of that in a country that you might be really familiar with.
Yeah. Well,
perhaps that you live within.
Yeah, I mean, you could say that in globally in lots of different ways, right? I mean, what is fake news, right? Fake news is news that doesn't agree with you, right? So it's like, two parties, and I'm not saying political parties, although it could be, are just yelling at each other with their own lenses on, and the other people are just idiots, right? And so it's I was just working with a group over in Africa earlier this week. Had a meeting with somebody in Italy this morning. These are actually not uniquely American problems, although we have our problems for sure. I mean, it's so easy to surround ourselves with people we want to that we start thinking this is the only way to think, and so that could span in, like you're saying, in lots of different ways.
And this I find fascinating, and I do actually go into this in my book on humanizing leadership, because it's our brain. We make about 30,000 decisions a day, and so clearly many of those are unconscious. And so the way we do that in a really expedited way is, obviously we have to base it on something, and we're basing it on past experiences, things that we've read, our culture, things we've been told, the people in our space. So we're quickly having to do that in order just to continue to go about our days. So it's actually, the reason I say it's interesting, and to your point, is that it's to be human. It actually isn't, those Italians are bad, or those, an individual who thinks that way is bad or wrong. It really is just being able to explore our own assumptions and filters and prejudices and biases, and more than ever in leadership.
And it's been a virtual smorgasbord of opportunities to have those sorts of discussions lately.
Right.
There's this guy named Jerry Weinberg, who, this is his quote. He says, "Something may look like a crisis, but it's only the end of an illusion," which I just love that quote. Something may look like a crisis, but it's only the end of an illusion. It could be a crisis in a relationship. Well, what was the illusion? That I can work 20 hours a day and not invest in my wife and just have a rockin' marriage, right? That's an illusion. Right? Someone's at a job loss. Please know, I don't mean it to be insensitive, because a lot of people have lost jobs just because of the economy. But sometimes what happens is someone's in a role for 20 years. Like, why should I join LinkedIn? Why should I update my resume? I've got it set. The illusion is that something's not going to knock them off there, and so I like that quote from Jay Weinberg, because it can apply in so many different ways. It may look like a crisis, but it's only the end of an illusion. So what we're trying to do and I guess we don't have to get into a philosophical debate about what reality is. Who knows that? But as best I can tell, is this entrepreneurial sort of thing good, or is it an illusion? As best I can tell, how I'm thinking politically or how I'm thinking about friends and relationships, is that tainted by all these other biases that you're talking about? Or is it just, or am I seeing it more straight? And so I feel like in many respects, part of our job in life is just try to, where are my illusions? It's not if they're there. Where are they? Like what, when in the last month or two have you heard someone say, this discussion on race that's going on in the U.S., this is really good to have, because the truth is I'm racist. I mean, most people are not admitting that they're racist. Most people are like, oh, I know some racists. Well, I know, this is someone else's problem, not ours. And I would just like to suggest that, because of what you were saying with the bias, is like, we've got, whether we even realize it or not, I'm not saying we're racist. I'm just saying it's not a matter of if we are, it's when we are. And it's not a matter of if we are this, it's when we are. What are the conditions under which? And so, I don't know. I just feel like this is an area that I'm being challenged in a lot right now, of like, where is it and what sort of situations where I'm just deluded? Actually, let me give you an example. Pandemic. I have a strong incentive for the economy to open because I'm a small business owner, and so I want the economy open. So I cherry pick the data that shows cases up. Oh, that's not good. Deaths down. That's great. And so I focus on these. I focus on the data that supports what I have incentives to believe to be true. And though I still feel that it's not going to poof go away. The people I've talked to said the virus mutates fast enough that a vaccine's only going to get a certain swath of it. This is going to be life, and we can't lock down forever. So anyway, but that bias can easily cause me to miss some of the real risks, which intellectually I agree with, but I can easily come off as missing the fact that there was deep pain in that person's life because of the impact that COVID had on them and things like that. So I don't know, this whole thing of fleshing out biases, Adam Grant said this way, he goes, my favorite new bias is the I'm not biased bias. Isn't that great? I'm not biased.
That's awesome. You had him on your show, right?
Twice, yep.
Twice. That is awesome. I listened to one of them. Yeah, certainly a fan of him and his thinking and the way he kind of keeps it real.
And one of the most humble people, considering who he is and his knowledge and stuff. So
yeah. One of the things that one of the quotes that I particularly like, I'm a huge fan of quotes, is one by Brene Brown she says, "I'm here to get it right, not to be right." And I thought that was a really powerful one to talk about in the context of what we were just saying now, like with racism and you said, it's not a matter of if we're racist or not. It's a matter of when. It's more like, when will I be? Because I don't want to make this conversation about racism, but such an important topic in right now. And I thought that was a really freeing, the same way that you gave us this different way of looking at fear and getting it 100%, think about 50 to 70%. I really think that quote gives permission for people to try to get it right, not be right.
I like that.
Permission to fail.
I learned this from a guy named David Epstein. He wrote this fabulous book called Range. In fact, it's one of the books I give out most, called Range. And it's kind of like, should you be a jack of all trades or a master of one? And he argues for the jack of all trades, that get lots of different experiences. Because, for example, I could have easily said, I'm not a public speaker. I'm a software developer, and never have had the opportunity, but sampling at the conferences gave me opportunities to go, oh, maybe this is it. So, I mean, a classic problem with people just getting out of college, but also in midlife, is like, I don't know what I'm doing. This isn't what I thought it would be. His point is none of that stuff is wasted. All these things you've done in the past could be potential springboard. So anyway, he's got lots of advice on that. I think it's a hugely encouraging, empowering book. But something that he says in the book is, it's not a matter of whether someone is gritty. Doesn't matter. It's not a matter of do you have grit or not. It's when are you gritty. And I don't know if he'd go so far as to say this, but I've had other guests that have said this, that, well, actually, if not directly, indirectly, more implicitly, if not explicitly, that there's no such thing as introversion or extroversion. It's not whether you are an extrovert, it's when you are. You can take someone who's highly introverted with their best friend who's highly introverted, doing something that they love, they have extroverted tendencies. Yeah. So I don't remember exactly how you said it, Louise, but I felt like it was so insightful that sometimes we put ourselves in boxes. Sometimes we put ourselves, I'm not this, I'm not that. And we hold ourselves back because we're maybe afraid to get out of that box. But when is it that we need to do this? When is it we need to do it? Or what are the situations where, no, I was bold then. It's not a matter of I'm not bold. I was bold when someone was, speaking ill of my child or whatever, So I think we're just too apt to maybe limit ourselves with the labels we give ourselves.
Yes, it's neat. I think that we are very polarized. I don't know if this is now at this point in time, or if this is just sort of human nature too. But even just going to the introversion, extroversion, continuing along that vein, I just see there's a continuum, and I think that lots of things are continuums. Mm-hmm. Feelings are continuums, and that's like an F word in business. I think we don't talk about feelings because people don't know how to deal with feelings in the workplace, which is a whole problem, I think. But the idea that you can't be, so something that I'm experiencing right now with a company that I'm doing some consulting with, you might be experiencing this too with those you're connecting with. I'm sure this is a widespread sort of sentiment. Mm-hmm. There's grief over the loss of what our quote unquote normal life had been, but with some people, depending on their circumstances for sure, there's also a level of gratitude for what it has brought them. Yeah. So often grief and gratitude don't really go hand in hand. So there's this kind of this, how is this working? Why is it like this? Instead of just accepting that there actually is no, it's not one or the other. It's not this or that. It can be yes and. Yeah. The yes and thing changed my life when my own coach talked to me about that a few years ago. Why does it have to be either or? Is it possible it could be yes and?
No, I think that is brilliant. And maybe we just get to two state, like it's either bad or it's good or whatever. And I would guess that if we took the time between the two of us, as well as everyone listening, we would be able to point back to things that we never would have picked that led to opportunities that we are so glad happened. But in the moment, it just felt like it sucked. We didn't, it was the grief, and we didn't feel even a bit of gratitude, but it's the thing that maybe pushed us. Like the rest of the story of my move to my thing was, I really dislike my boss. I mean, there were so many things I hated about it. And so I don't know if I'd call it grief, but it was just, I just didn't like it. I didn't like it, but I was probably too wimpy to make the jump, quite frankly. And so, getting the opportunity, negotiating for the package, that was like scary stuff. Yeah. Starting out on the own is scary stuff. It's not necessarily grief, but it's other emotions. But man, I couldn't imagine going back, So no. It is interesting if we can hold all of those somehow, of like, I can feel grief. How'd you say it? I can feel grief, but also gratitude. I can feel despair, but have hope. Knowing that there is something on the other side of this. I really like your point that it's so easy to get caught up in the moment and not realize there is going to be like within the last 4 months, I've heard people say, handshaking is gone. We'll never handshake again. Yeah. And I've had many handshakes this week. You know, like, so I think it's just, so what's the term? Catastrophize, right? We catastrophize, right? Like, oh, I'll never. And once again, we're not trying to diminish anyone's pain.
Of course.
But there is often more opportunity, and sometimes closer around the corner than what we realize. And at least that's what history would tell us. So
I think when we are in discomfort, we want to move away from that. Right. And so I think if you're too comfortable in a relationship, it might not be great. Mm-hmm. You stay. And again, that might be the right decision long term as well. I'm not trying to encourage everyone to leave, but same with the job.
Louise show.
I know. And same with you may have a bigger aspirations, or bigger dreams, but there's not the itch, or there's not enough of a push to make it happen. And so I think a lot of times it's a pain or aggravation or dislike for a boss or something that actually causes. When I think about two major life shifts in my life, they were things that I knew I needed to do years prior, but it was, there was a tipping point that there was no choice. It was kind of like, there really is no choice, Louise. You didn't listen to the earlier whispers. Here you go. It's showtime.
There's this MIT fellow named Ed Schein, who's in his early 90s now. Interviewing Ed was like interviewing Yoda. I mean, this guy.
Oh, wow.
He was just brilliant. He's the guy who coined the term corporate culture, but he's got this line that says, it's a pain to try something new. Now he says it in more academic terms, but it's a pain to learn to do new things, whether it's start a new company, whether it's take on new skills, to write a book, to start a podcast, whatever. It's a pain. He calls it learning anxiety. Learning anxiety is difficult. But one of the things he said is, because it's so difficult, we don't make changes until survival anxiety is greater than learning anxiety. Now, that to me was like mind blowing, because it's like, what have I been holding off until I'm pushed off the cliff? Yeah. Like, why do we wait so long? It's until it's a survival anxiety sort of thing. Well, because it's a pain to try something new. So it's like this balance. I love your spectrum picture. There's this balance between, if we're always on this leading edge, diving off cliffs, that may be a little bit difficult. But if we get so far off on the other side of just, I'm going to stay in my cocoon, that's going to be a problem. And why do people listen to you? Because you challenge people to learn. You challenge people to kind of push out of status quo, that you can be braver than what you are. You can make these key decisions. And I think that is a message that this world needs right now, when we're so afraid.
Oh, thank you. I want to shift a little bit, if we can. I can't believe it's not too long until the end of this podcast or until this radio show. Where do I want to go? So I want to understand how you have, become such a success in, working with the United Nations and huge companies. Well, Microsoft, you've mentioned how. But how did you get connected as this software developer who had this little itch, who had a couple, some successes and followed that? Yeah. Who are the people and things what are the things and the people that you've connected with that have helped you along this journey that might be of guidance to listeners?
Yeah, there's so many things that come to mind, Louise, because so a principle from earlier in the discussion is, unless there's a compelling reason to say no, say yes. That's something to keep in mind. Unless there's a compelling reason to say no, say yes. So that's been kind of a guiding principle. But early on, something that was helpful was a mentor who said, you more than you're a salesperson. I'm like, I don't, salespeople were the bad people. They were the people promising things that we had to deliver, and I never really thought of myself. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, but he drew it as a baseball diamond, and the baseball diamond, first base. So he goes like the I guess as you look at a diamond from the top, the right side of the diamond, so first base and second base, he says is marketing, the left side is sales. So he goes, people don't get this right. And I'm not claiming this to be truth. I'm just saying how he told me, and this led to given opportunities for me. First base is awareness. Second base is comfort. Third base is more typical sales were needs assessment, and then home plate would be actually trying to close a deal. What was helpful to me was I think a lot of people think when they're starting something new is, well, I'll put a website out there and I will build it and they will come.
Yeah.
You know, clearly, if I just put a website out there, that's not how it works, right? I mean, I think most people have no idea how much work you put into what you're doing right now, and writing a book on the side, and all this other stuff, right? There's like so much more to it, and that's work, but it leads to awareness. And so, what are people doing to get more awareness? So from a business owner perspective, you know, the number one reason why I do my podcast, well, actually I thought it was going to be awareness. I didn't realize how much I was going to learn through it all too, but there's like awareness, and then there's comfort. After a while, people are like, man, Louise rocks. I mean, Louise, I like how she talks, right? So people become aware of you, they become more comfortable with you, and then they go, you know, Louise, you've talked about coaching, you've talked about consulting, like we have something, and then it leads to sales. So the podcast I started in 2009 just by saying yes. Somebody interviewed me. I'm like, how does this work? I'm like, I'm a techie. I can do this. And so, you know, it just, you know, we're just about ready to publish episode 300. And it was just by saying yes. But my point of this one is that a website can help. Having a brochure can help. But we can spend all this time just, you know, fiddling with those and not doing things that provide more awareness. Now, what I think is interesting about that potential model is we can maybe put it even for someone who's listening to us that's in a typical corporate job. I think a lot of people just are like, my good work will stand on its own. And it ought to work that way, but it often isn't that way. But if you become the elbow and backstabber and like, look at me, no one wants to be that person either. But I think there's something to be said for working on awareness. What I mean by that is just more visibility. Like especially if you're working from home, you know, make sure you get, like, as one guest told me, make sure your boss hears your name every day. Yeah. Because otherwise it's out of sight, out of mind. And I suppose that could be in a bad way, but really that they see you, that there's visibility. You're speaking up in meetings, that if you're in a Zoom meeting or a Microsoft Teams meeting, that you're not just camera off, quiet for that entire hour, that you're asking questions, you're on the chat box, you know. But I think there's something about awareness. You could think of that as visibility. The more you do that, it gets you to second base, which is there's comfort. Like, man, she brings up good things in that meeting. You know what? She might be an opportunity for this next promotion, which then the home play is where you're going to go for it. So that model, you know, there's a guy named George Box who said, every model is wrong. Some are useful. And so this is probably an radically incomplete model for marketing and selling, but I think it's useful because somebody started a business, like, how do I sell? How do I get money? Well, how about you just hit some singles, so to speak, get to first base, like
get on base.
Right. And LinkedIn,
Moneyball.
You and Jay, I mean, you guys are incredible with how you use LinkedIn, not in a way of like, look at me. I mean, Jay's Fabulous Four is, that's what it's called, right?
Fantastic. Close. Fantastic Four.
Sorry,
yeah.
I didn't feel right when I was going to say it, but that Fantastic Four, he's lifting other people up, but it also is visibility where people love Jay because he's not like, and this week, look at what I did, you know? So people can use tools like that to increase their visibility or to increase their awareness. And the thing with the UN was literally out of the blue. I wasn't selling them. I wasn't like, how do I strategically get to home plate with? Right. It's like, they're like, hey, you teach a class in this subject, don't you? I'm like, yeah. They go, would you do it? I'm like, let me think about it. Yes, yeah, of course I'll do it. Yeah. And so it's what are people doing? And you don't have to like be neon lights around this, but it's just be visible, add value. You know, lift other people up. And by that, after a while, people increases awareness, increases comfort, and that leads to opportunities. Yeah.
I love models, by the way, and despite, and understand what you're saying, that many can be incomplete, it create a container for us to then, take action on and towards. And so I love that you just shared that, and such a great one for, as you said, for both entrepreneurs as well as people who work for a company. And I want to repeat something that you said, because I thought it was so powerful. Unless there's a compelling reason to say no, say yes. I hope you all wrote that down. That was, I think, so, again, another really tangible takeaway when you add that to the thinking about 50 to 70% likelihood of success. You put those things together.
Yeah.
And I think those are really, really powerful tools. And this is how we do it, friends. This is how we do the hard things.
Yes.
So we've got 5 minutes left, Andy. Mind if we jump into some rapid fire questions?
Go for it.
Okay. What advice would you give to your younger self?
Probably to have listened to your show earlier, in the sense of the boldness, like take the risk. Like I kind of alluded to it before. I just don't feel like I've been a big risk taker. And I think I was too apt to be the quiet person in the meeting and not speak up. And the interesting research on this one is you don't have to be, if someone's more introverted, you don't have to be an extrovert. But in that meeting, you might need to ramp it up and then come back. But ramp it up. I think the advice I'd give to my younger self would be a little more assertiveness, +1 the assertiveness. But I don't have to change who I am, but do that.
I think that's really good advice. What does the world need more of?
I mean, there's a lot of things. I mean, I'm a Jesus follower, and so one of the key things from a biblical worldview is this idea of just forgiveness. It's just reconciliation. There's this sense of people have intrinsic value. And I just feel like we're too apt right now, and most of it driven by politics, but to think of the other side is the idiots, like we've talked about before. And I think there's something powerful about forgiveness that it's more powerful than drugs. It's more powerful than, forgiveness is a powerful construct in so many ways, even the ancestral stuff from the last episode, of like coming to peace with the past. So anyway, I would say, let's go with forgiveness.
I appreciate and respect where that comes from in your roots. And I also, it's also interesting because whether you are a follower of Jesus and God or not, that is a human thing. Right. It is a human thing. Well, obviously linked very much to religion as well. But other than your own 3 books and your own kick-ass podcast, do you have a go-to book or podcast that you can recommend to our listeners?
A go-to podcast is Shane Parrish's Knowledge Project. And the reason is, not only does it have good content, but he is my hero when it comes to interviewing. I'm a better interviewer when I listen to Shane Parrish. And so I would say the Knowledge Project, that'd be the go-to podcast. And I just can't even imagine a go-to book, only just because it really depends what the presenting issue is. But one of my favorites recently has been from a very controversial person named Peter Boghossian. He wrote a book called How to Have Impossible Conversations. And Peter, it's longer than we have to talk about him, but he is on a mission right now. I won't even get into it, but anyway, he goes, I'll talk to KKK. I'll talk to Nazis. He goes, I'll talk to anybody. And he goes, the point is not that I'm going to agree with them, but he goes, we need to learn how to talk with people. Right. And he goes, and it's not yelling at them. It is literally trying to understand where they come from. He calls it epistemology. And by using his techniques, a lot of times people's own arguments fall right. apart. You don't have to tell them. You're just like, well, tell me why you believe that. I mean, that's cool. And what about in that situation? So it's not litigating, but there's one chapter on conversation. I just say, read that chapter. I think it's like chapter 2 or 3. Just that chapter alone is worth the price of the book. And so I end up thinking a lot about Peter's work right now.
Amazing. Very timely and relevant. I should have asked you more what's on your bedside table right now as opposed to a go-to book or podcast, because I think that's probably more suitable for someone who's a constant learner. Andy, it's the top of the hour. It's just been an amazing time that I've been able to share with you. Do you have any final, before you share with us how people can find you and reach out to you and connect with you or work with you, do you have any final words of wisdom that you'd like to share that you've not already?
I think a lot of what we've said is what I resonate with is sometimes it's just we're this close to an opportunity because we haven't said yes, or something I guess we haven't said is haven't made the ask. Like there's an ask that if we would just make this ask, it would provide opportunities, like an opportunity to come to that meeting, an opportunity for that role. There really is a far more opportunity available to us if we would +1 some of that assertiveness, which is what this podcast is all about. So
awesome.
Advice, keep listening to Louise. How about that?
I love that. I'll definitely second that. Andy, how can people reach you? And I'll put this in the show notes. How can people get in touch with you?
On any podcast app, just search for People and Projects Podcast. So that'd be a great place to start.
Awesome. People and Project Podcast. Got it. Andy, thank you so much for everything that you have shared with me and my listeners today. And of course, even more so for your time, which it's only a finite amount of. Thanks for sharing.
Lovely discussion. Thanks.
Thanks, Andy. And of course, thanks to all of you as well for tuning into today's show. And I invite you to connect with me directly at louisehreed.com. If you have any questions or want to talk about coaching, speaking engagements, or leadership consulting, let's all live inspired and grow together and be brave, be bold, be happy. Until next week, I'm Louise H. Reed, wishing all of you an amazing day. And I will leave you with Andy's words: unless there's a compelling reason to say no, say yes. Goodbye, my friends.